You've tuned into the Bellingham Podcast for the week of December 15, last episode of 2019. This is episode 141. From that city that I can't find a rhyme, by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barsay.
And fa la 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 la, I am Chris Powell. On this episode, you take the good, you take the bad, and you take them both, and there you have the Bellingham Podcast. The Bellingham Podcast. There's a time you got to go and show your podcast, and now you know about the Bellingham Podcast. The Bellingham Podcast. When the internet never seems to be living up to your dreams, and suddenly you're finding out that AJ and I are all about you. You! It takes a lot to get things right when you're listening to the Bellingham Podcast.
The Bellingham Podcast.
That's right.
The Bellingham Podcast.
That's right.
Okay, what's the hook? I don't, what's...
Okay, so let me educate you,
youngin.
youngin.
Educate me there,
okay,
old.
Gen Y. There was a TV show in the 1980s called The Facts of Life. It ran in probably the early 80s to about the mid to late 80s or so.
Sure.
They had a theme. I just borrowed that theme in the hook for this show.
Groovy, man.
There you go.
It sounded like you were a beat poet. How you doing, Chris?
I'm just, I'm happy I got the Christmas cheer. The holiday season is firmly entrenched, but life is pretty good at this point. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Dude, what's up with our weather, man? Like, we had we have like gale force warnings until tonight or something like that?
Yep. This is the schizophrenic weather time. Santa's sleigh may be going, bopping around in various directions.
Nah, he's going Mach 2 with his hair on fire.
Okay, Maverick.
Okay, so at the top of the show, this is the last episode for 2019.
Yes.
And so this is typically in the past, we call this our listener-isode, where we thank you, the listener.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone in Bellingham and in Washington State and in the United States and everywhere else around the world that you might be listening to us on, whether it's in your favorite podcast app or on KMRE 102.3 FM.
They're community powered and also streaming at kmre.org.
So we just wanted to say thank you.
Yes. But guess what?
What, Chris?
In 2019, this is like we've been doing this for a while, but in just this calendar year, I did a little bit of checking. We had 41 episodes.
Yes, because we're also transparent here on the Bellingham Podcast.
Okay, but
41 episodes out of 52 weeks.
Not bad of talking about stuff, and we talked a lot about a lot of stuff.
We did, and this year I would say is the most chunked season that we've done.
Yep, we did some mini-series, and we actually entered the interview zone. Submit it for your approval. Another person wants to join in on the podcast to share their story and talk about life in what they're doing on the Bellingham Podcast. Signpost up ahead. Oh, actually, that's a microphone. So, we did some mini-series and interviews. AJ, you had the Venn diagram of both.
Yes, yeah. So I feel so long ago, honestly. At the beginning of the year, because at the end of 2018, I launched and sold out of my first photography magazine, The Analog Explorer.
Volume 1. Soon to be Volume 2, I hope.
Work in progress.
All right.
But when I did that, in kind of getting my thoughts together and stuff, and all the inspirations that kind of led to me to kind of do what I did, there was also this other niche that the Analog Explorer taps on, which is horology and the watch fam. And out of it, before there was this huge kind of big boom in Podcastville right now, like there was only like a handful of podcasts, quote unquote, around horology and watch fam and wristwatches in general from an enthusiast standpoint. And so I kind of wanted to inject our own little kind of views and vibe to that zone.
Get the AJ funk on it.
Yeah. So the Analog Explorer officially sponsored a mini series for the Bellingham Podcast on the Watch Fam, and we had 5 interviews, all remote, which was our first foray into remote interviewing too.
Yes.
And so we had Dan over in the UK, we had Terry over at Toxic NATOs, Eric over at EA8. Yep. Elena, who is a watchmaker out of Seattle, and Buying on Time. And so all of these different aspects, we had everything from, a maker to a watchmaker to an enthusiast, a collector, a leather maker, and all of these folks, I wanted to capture kind of why they do what they do and brought them onto the show. I do want to make a little bit of a shout out because Dan over in the UK, Dan, you're still the goods. He has a new Instagram account, or not new, I guess. I mean, he's kind of a thing on the Instagram in the Watch.
He's a really big deal.
I think he's a big deal. He's a cool dude.
Yes.
So he had to change his handle for his Instagram account, but he also has another one that he kind of wanted to dedicate towards the Watch fam. And he goes now by timely_moments. So if you're on Instagram and you like... if you like Braemon especially,
yes.
or military watches, he is part of the British military over there. So if you want a different vibe, go ahead and take a look at this new account that he has, because it's different than the show notes for if you're taking a look at the Analog Explorer episodes.
Fun fact about the Watch Fam interviews that AJ did in the month of March 2019. If you were to swipe down on your mobile phone or tablet, watch me take my finger and kind of swipe down. They are between episodes 112 and 113. Technically, we've done 146 episodes total, but we did not really count these 5 Watch Fam interviews as numbers of the Bellingham Podcast.
Because
they were special.
They were sponsored sponsored content, and we always like to keep things separated.
Just like The Offspring, yes. And that was fun to be a part of in the periphery, because I know that was kind of your pet project.
Oh yeah,
for that.
But you had a pet project this year too, amigo. Okay.
Yeah, just
No. Do not downplay. I'm going to use superlatives because you don't. Community connections, bro.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 episodes. Episodes 111, 114, 115, 122, 125, 130, and 135 for the record. Mr. Chris Powell. Ranging. Oh, I knew you were going to go this way. I had a shtick prepared.
Yes, bring on the shtick.
I have the shtick, dude. You covered everything from a
couple executive directors of worthy nonprofits.
There you go.
Yes.
I knew you'd have a better shtick than me, but dude, these are some heavy hitters in our community.
I am a heavy hitter based on my weight. Tonnage, eighth of a tonnage, but I had the opportunity and pleasure to be able to interview Miss Moonwater from the Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center, 111, Hans Erchinger-Davis from the Lighthouse Mission, 114, Emily O'Connor with Lydia Place, 115. Actually, all of these 3 are executive directors of their worthy nonprofits here in Bellingham and Whatcom County. Swipe down and listen to those interviews. They got a lot to say, and it's still relevant as we approach 2020. I also had a chance to interview faculty with the IDEA Institute at Western Washington University, Meg Weber, who's also involved in a number of nonprofits, Pickford Cinema and Technology Alliance Group Northwest, Heather Simpson, who is the founder of She Leads Me, empowering women in leadership and business, and Whatcom County Councilperson Carol Frazey in a windstorm that I'm going to think twice about having with all of the editing that had to be done to make sure we can hear the esteemed councilperson in the interview.
Yes. I forgot about that. Yes. Chris. That took me a while to edit.
My pet project turned into a lot of work for AJ when the wind kicked up.
That one episode.
And also the president and CEO of Whatcom Educational Credit Union, Jennifer Kutcher. I had the pleasure of interviewing these 7 fabulous folks, and check these interviews out. Community Connections. I like telling the story behind the story, like little known facts about people, not just the bullet points, but actually kind of the why behind some of these things, and also to get to know their perspective about Bellingham.
Right. And the thing about it is, in both of our mini series that we did, you and I kind of take the tack of kind of conversationalist form, but guided. So there's not a lot of, it's sharp, it's fast paced. It's not like some, and I'm not trying to throw any particular podcast under the bus, but we tend to guide our folks so that there's a point.
Sure.
Because we are still a 30-minute show.
I would say that you can consider me the limousine driver taking my interviewee to the destination that we all want to get to. And that's a fun interview of, sharing and having a conversation, as opposed to a roller coaster, which we don't know where anything is going to go. That's kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Back in 2018, we took on about a 5-part mini-series, so to speak, called Words of Note. We took a word from another language and had a fun with it and talked about, what does it mean to us? How can we find it in Bellingham, et cetera, et cetera. Did a little bit of a redo, an encore, if you will, brought the band back together for the Words of Note couple episodes for Lykke and Ikigai.
Yeah, and I think this was our first foray in 2018 where you and I were kind of playing with the concept of evergreen content. Like, a lot of the times by the time you listen to that episode, or if you're not up to date in that feed, the content doesn't really match with the times. And I think you and I were kind of, we love language. We
I know all the words.
We have all the greatest words.
Yeah.
But, we kind of looked at this as an avenue of, look, there's a little bit of a zeitgeist, kind of making it timely. But the way that we research things, you could listen to episode 116 for Lykke or 118 for Ikigai today, tomorrow, however long our show ends up in the future. And it's evergreen. It doesn't matter if you're listening it in 2020 or in 2030. Technically, it would still mesh. We didn't really, we kind of just talk about the dipstick of culture that word is today, but we focus more on the word.
And if you're listening to this in the year 2030, hi, thanks for listening.
And please send a direct message to us from the future of what the winning lotto numbers are.
That's right.
Chris and I and the Bellingham Podcast would be very appreciative.
Send me the sports almanac from 2030. Why don't you?
Thanks,
anyway,
McFly. Thanks.
We talked about life in Bellingham in a couple of cases. We had fun. I mean, this is life in Bellingham.
We have fun. I'm confused, Chris. We're a serious show.
Of course we are, but it's fun to talk about stereotypes in the Pacific Northwest. That was episode. It's a two-parter because we had so many stereotypes.
Yeah.
Of what people are like here in Bellingham, episodes 120 and 121.
Yeah.
And then as we were kind of reveling in that wonderful, fun look at life in Bellingham, we were just like, we haven't done a show about someone coming to Bellingham for the first time.
Yeah,
so
that was
for
cool.
all the folks.
In both those cases, if I recall, for PNW Stereotypes, that came in from a listener, an idea from a listener, if I recall. And I want to say it was Watch Medicine over in Florida.
It wasn't Jeff Foxworthy.
No, it wasn't Jeff Foxworthy.
Okay.
I think he was the one that DM'd me about that and kind of gave me the seed for that idea. And I believe the Welcome to Bellingham episode 123 also came in from a DM from a listener.
Sure.
But no, there was somebody coming to town because you and I were riffing about it. You got a DM on Instagram from a listener saying like, hey, I'm coming new to town. I have a family. What do I do? Or something like that.
And so we were able to give a couple ideas about where to go, what to do, the scene, if you will, from someone who's not that huge on Instagram.
Yeah. So our apologies. I don't remember the handles offhand, and if we find that, we'll try to link you in the show notes.
And in 2019, as we're taking a look back, dialing the clock back in the DeLorean to go back a few months, there is
gigawatts.
Yes, we took a look at some gigawatts, and there was a lot of elections that occurred this fall season that is now in the rearview mirror. But back then, we had a pretty extensive, spirited mayoral election going on. And you know what? Without talking about who we liked or voted for,
nope.
Heck with that. We're going to talk about what we would do as mayor.
Exactly.
And that was episode 124, right after Welcome to Bellingham. And I think our esteemed listeners got a real insight about why we are not going for mayor of Bellingham.
Yeah, there were quite, thank you listeners, there were quite some interesting DMs and opinions and views, and we greatly appreciated them. But remember, and I will reiterate this, Chris and I take politics on this show, tongue firmly planted in cheek.
And cheek firmly planted in tongue.
Correct.
In some cases, depending on how you your perspective. There was a little trip that I took during the summer with my wife that one single observation turned into an episode. Yeah. And going to Bend, Oregon, of all places. Hello, Bend.
What's up, Bend?
And to see in the summertime how there was a community shuttle service to take people around the downtown area. They had on the shuttle car the Bend Pledge. Yeah. And we flipped that around. Why isn't there a Bellingham
Pledge
about how we can make this place better, be nice to others? I think that's a platform that both of us can stand on.
I agree with my opponent on that regard.
Absolutely. I yield my time to the next look at Bellingham and the fair, an annual.
Yeah, it's the fair.
It's a Whatcom County thing.
It's the Chris Powell approved turkey leg totin' fair.
That's right. And many other things there for families. But a couple episodes about life in Bellingham because we are the Bellingham Podcast. But of course, AJ and I are both technologists. And we can't get away from it. We had to talk about some form of technology.
So leading into it, before we get into that, there was one piece of technology that was reoccurring. It's a trope on our show, and that is you might be listening to us on KMRE 102.3 FM.
Yep, the community powered and streaming worldwide at kmre.org.
And I believe that we're also, our time slots changed now. So
Saturdays at 3 p.m.
So we're at Saturdays at 3 p.m. if you're here in Bellingham, Washington.
So one of the things that we don't talk about, oh my gosh, look at the new products that just come out.
Yeah, no.
We're observing things in Bellingham. Better be on your best behavior, folks. We might be observing you and doing a show about it. I happen to notice something in a wonderful restaurant chain, a national
That's right.
a national chain in the United States. It used to be known as the International House of Pancakes. Now we just call it IHOP. No relation to Apple's iGear.
No, it's an uppercase I on this case.
Okay, great. And I was fascinated by how efficient and how they were observing all of the patrons to get them fed, get the kiddos occupied, and then get them out.
Yeah.
Politely. And talking about
efficiently,
yes. And talking about productivity, that was a really fun show in episode 113 about how we were able to blend a restaurant with tech and productivity.
Which behind the scenes, if some folks looked at, I think the MP3, I think one of our listeners pointed this out. I didn't change. Usually I change the name of the MP3 file that you download before it goes into the feed.
Okay.
I believe that one I left as so each episode, listeners, gets kind of an internal working code name. And the name of that one was IHoppin'.
There you go.
And somebody was just like, a geek of the show pointed that out, I think. And I think I might have changed it after that. But that was the IHoppin' episode.
It's a nice Easter egg. Good catch, listener.
Yeah,
Keep listening.
Yeah,
you might find something else.
Yeah, I can't remember who pointed that out. We should have looked up our listeners across the last year that have chimed in.
The tens of thousands and the millions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so IHoppin'.
We talked, but it's not just talking about, oh, look, here's a new phone, or look, here's a new laptop. We talked about digital Hygge.
Yes, that one I had fun with.
Of course, because when we do something, two things, the intersection of two things we like,
yes,
it's bound to be a stellar show.
Well, the thing about that episode was, I mean, Hygge technically is a very analog, tactile thing, and we kind of infused it a little bit with like digital, which is very sterile, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a fun juxtaposition. That concept might revisit us in 2020.
Of course.
It's kind of I haven't seen anybody juxtapose that concept.
We're just the knuckleheads to go for it.
Why not? It fits us. So that was 105 for digital Hygge. And then you rebooted your online life in 117.
Yeah, and I wanted to just kind of redo a whole lot of things, get a new email address, do a number of things. That was episode 117. You can see how in this zone, there's a whole lot of content that we have going on. Just wanted to try something different and go through the process, because there may come a time where circumstances make it imperative for someone to reboot their online life. Yeah. And I'll go first.
Well, and that kind of dovetailed about 20 episodes later, where you were like, well, what if the big bad Google was the big bad Google, and how do you de-Googlify yourself?
Yeah, I went G-free for a while.
G-free, there we go.
You heard
I like
it here
that
first.
one.
And it's
Patent
tough.
pending.
It's tough. But yes, kiddos, it is possible to do. But it does take a great deal of effort and a whole lot of discipline to be able to do that.
Well, the cool thing about that episode, because when you first told me about that idea, I was like, dude, we've seen the articles of the journalists. Like, I think New York Times did this, where they tried to do trackers to see how you could use the internet without Google. And you kind of took it from the more personal perspective of,
hold my beverage and watch this.
Yeah, more of like, okay, look, the Google, the Facebook, all of the bigs are always tracking all the time. And if you turn off all of that, yes, a lot of features of the open web break. You took it from the perspective of, what if I just stopped using actively the Google services?
Episode 138, not too many swipes down from where we're at right now. If you want to hear my perspective, and finally, as we were kind of having themes on technology, you're not limited, ladies and gentlemen, to AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint. There's a whole lot of other worthy candidates.
Sure.
Instead of the loudmouths at the bar, there's a lot of quiet folks just sitting there having a drink that are really pleasant to talk with and don't cost an arm and a leg. They're called MVNOs.
Mobile virtualized network operators.
Thank you. My brain is mush this morning, and I didn't have my caffeine by design.
I was going to say, you're still like 2 weeks to go.
2 weeks in, yeah. But we talked about other phone carriers to connect your mobile phone to that would give you cheaper service and still saturated around this area. What a wonderful concept as you're thinking about Christmas presents and other ways to save money at the end of the year.
Oh, that would be a nice Christmas gift. It's, hello, honey. Here is some cashola in your pocket for the next year. It's called I Switched Our Service. It still uses the AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, or Verizon, but we're saving half the cashola that we used to spend.
So that was $119 in case you want to check out other options available. But speaking of beverages, talked about beverages just a second ago. There's a lot of beverages in Bellingham.
Wait, there's beverages in Bellingham?
I'm gonna kind of plant a flag if we haven't done this already, but I'm actually gonna talk about. There's a lot of beer consumed in this town. There's podcasts about beer in this town.
Beer? That's a thing?
Wine, hard liquor, other things like that. It's everywhere because it's a popular social activity. Well, guess what? I'm a fan of those folks that are currently our heroes among us who are in recovery from various addictions. And here at the Bellingham Podcast, I got 50% of a voice, maybe 49 since you do the audio editing.
No,
but I got
50. We're equal. 50,
Okay,
50.
I got a 50% of a voice, and I'm saying we're not going to be talking about the latest dranks and drankeries around all the time.
Sure.
We dedicated a show about seltzer.
Which
I take your beer, your hard cider, your wine, your spritzer, your Jack Daniels, your vodka, and I give you cool, crisp, clean seltzer.
But we also took it from a history perspective.
Of course
we talked
we
about
are.
like the spa town, you know, and how we got to the mineral water versus seltzer versus
Because we're two researching mamma jammas.
or at least we try to portray them on podcasts.
So yeah, 129
was the bubbly episode, was the working name of that episode.
And of course, there are events in town. You know, it seems in Bellingham, and I'm going to throw Bellingham under the bus for a while. It seems during the nice weather season, which is about 3 weeks, there's a beer fest around every weekend.
Yes.
Not a fan as I'm thinking about our heroes and folks that just don't really want to indulge.
Sure.
But there's a food truck rodeo that occurs in the fall.
Yeah.
And you best believe that I'm going to be there for that one too.
But this year's it was a windy one, wasn't it?
Oh man, it was a gusty. It was a gusty event. But yeah, talking about a lot of the food trucks around Bellingham, Whatcom County. It's like the big old United Nations of food.
I like that one.
That's kind of cool. You heard it here first again. But then the capper of beverages, the one that fuels this show for about 4 years now.
Yes.
Coffee.
This is coffee.
Pick off a 1961 documentary, which is totally hilarious.
And also in the public domain.
And let's bring it up to date. Let's breathe new life into it for the Roaring 20s coming up.
Yeah.
And the history of coffee and a couple other episodes about coffee shop life.
Yeah.
And types of ways to make coffee.
And that the coffee miniseries was 132 through 134. Also, some of the most downloaded episodes of the season, and also much like the mayoral one that we did, one of the most commented. There was one comment I got from a listener, Dan, the other Dan, U.S. Dan, Navy Dan.
There you go. Hi, Navy Dan.
And he reached out. He's like, "Whoa! I got a bone to pick with you too." And so I keep reading. He goes, "You named all of those different brewing methods, but you don't show any love for toddy. What's up with that?"
Huh.
You know, it's just like toddy coffee, which is more like cold brew coffee, that vein. And I was just like, it's steeping. It's one of the methods. Mic drop. Like, you know, like I love you, bro, but like,
Yes.
you know, it was just it is funny when we get. Because we hit on so many different topics, it's so funny when we get like listener comments and questions, which we super appreciate. Thank you everybody so much. Mm-hmm. But it's always funny because like just as much as you and I have a passion for all these different topics, our listeners do too.
Of course.
And it's great. And it's
listeners
great discourse.
Our listeners are very lovely and talented, beautiful people.
Yes, all around the world.
And so a little bit of food and drink for the topics of the show. But the main thing that I really enjoy about this Bellingham podcast that we have is that sometimes you get a look behind the curtain at your knucklehead hosts, AJ and myself.
Gregarious idiots with a microphone.
That's another way of describing us. And sometimes I don't want to be with this announcer voice that you might be hearing me right now.
I'm confused. That's just your voice, Chris.
Sometimes I just want to be Chris.
Yes.
And, you know, there are some podcasts out there where the people will they talk about keeping it real. They talk about being transparent and genuine and things like that. When you talk about the transparency pool and how you share stuff about your life that you normally don't share in
a public format.
Check out episode 106 if you want to see a little bit of a dive into a transparency pool. Along those lines, in this society, we are not. We are always encouraged. It's applauded to be always busy, always killing it, always crushing.
Gotta crush it. Gotta hustle.
And we.
Yes.
I'm going to take we on this.
Yeah, we can do it. The royal we.
We have found, AJ and I have found that when you aren't crushing it every day and killing it and leveling up and all those other stupid idioms that we are seeing on books in Barnes & Noble and other places, there's a thing called boredom that let your mind rest and let you actually process things. We did an actual episode on boredom.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was bored 1 minute recording it.
No, that was good. And again, I think it also, we tapped into that episode with regards to like the constant stimulation that we get with our digital devices, and constant stimulation that we have kind of force-fed our brains, and disconnecting from that, which was also kind of I will even say, a mental health track that we kind of took for a little bit.
And it's a big thing.
Yeah. That was 109. The episode right before that, 108.
Swipe up slightly.
Swipe up just a skosh. And you get, we decided to go into big business investment. Okay.
Yes.
And we talked about investment really hard on the return on investment on goodness.
Uh-huh.
And that was a cool kind of twist as well.
That is a commodity that actually betters the world in many ways. I enjoyed that show. It was number 108 in the list. But then we also just recently wanted to talk about how we got where we are today, and some of our inspirations and influences. And I think that's a nice look back. And presently as well, for those who have impacted us. And, if you haven't thought about that for a while, folks listening right now, think about those who got you where you are today.
Right.
They deserve a little bit of thanks as we approach the end of the year.
Yeah.
So
and that was deliberate. Like you and I, when we were spinning down the show for the year, you and I were trying to figure out like, what do we want to do? And I mean, of course, there's always like apps that push like your year-end recap. And when you and I were sitting and kind of chatting on a Tuesday of what we wanted to do, kind of to show a little bit behind the curtain of the show here, you and I were really harping on the term influencer. Like we were on our soapbox, and you and I kind of like settled down a little bit and we're like, well, what influences us? Like genuinely influences us. And that's where those two episodes came from, for our inspirations and influences.
Pop quiz, AJ.
Okay, pop answer, Chris.
As we have discussed the wonderful year that was 2019 for the Bellingham Podcast, you get one desert island episode. What is the favorite episode that if you had to only have one available, what would that be?
That's a tough one. I mean, it would, for me, so I feel like I can't pick on the Watch Fam episodes, the Analog Sports, that was sponsored content. I mean, I guess for me, I would have to go with the PNW Stereotype, the two-parter. Oh, yeah. And I would say that two-parter is one episode, just we have to split it because of our
Because we
slot.
just kept yapping on it.
Well, no, I liked, the Pacific Northwest culture and stuff. I like that Stereotype series. That was cool.
It's fun to check out. So,
what about you, Chris?
I thoroughly enjoyed my interviews with my guests who joined us, but I gotta say the coolest one that I can see being like, this is 2019, it's the Welcome to Bellingham show.
Yeah, the Welcome to Bellingham show was good.
It's simple. It's an introduction to life as we know it. We're so used to so many things around here. What a wonderful way to introduce someone to this beautiful world and this land that we live in. So anyway, Welcome to Bellingham is my favorite show. Once again, thank you for listening to our shows. And if you like this and swipe down in the list of previous episodes, we appreciate it. As we're approaching the end of 2019, I want to make I want to raise awareness for something that's very essential to this community, and something that is on my mind and on AJ's mind since I had told him about it. The Bellingham Food Bank, in case you didn't know, is the fourth largest food bank in Washington State.
Fourth largest in the state, folks.
And so this is an important place that serves many people in our community, and they deserve some attention, some love, and some donations to help prosper.
Some help.
And a way that you can donate. Now, there's one thing to donate food or other things like that. I talked to a couple sources involved with the Bellingham Food Bank, and should you be inclined as you approach the end of the year, donating cash to the Bellingham Food Bank goes to a, quote, milk money account. Got a link to it in the show notes. For the love of Barry Windham.
Drink milk.
Yeah, Bellingham Food Bank buys fresh milk from Edeline Dairy here in Whatcom County and fresh eggs locally with the donated cashola. That's a great use to be able to provide not only all of the food stuffs that is being given to the folks who arrive, but also fresh milk and eggs. That's important. From their website, the food bank need to buy more than 700 half gallons of milk each week. And Edeline Dairy sells milk to them at a great price. So do you have what it takes to be a milk money superhero?
Oh, that's some good copy right there.
That's pulled from their website.
Yeah.
That's not my question. But it's a great question to ask.
Right. And also I want to say they're not paying for this endorsement.
Not at all.
I just think that the food bank is on the goods list, just full disclosure, as we normally do.
Absolutely. And we value the people that work there, and we value the service and what they do for this county. Also, should you not be up for donating cashola, donating diapers and feminine hygiene products would be greatly appreciated. Keep that in mind as we approach 2019. One quick little tidbit in our points of interest, that we have talked about.
Yeah. So we starting a couple episodes back, we were kind of playing around with this idea that a lot of other podcasts are doing, which are these cultural recommendations. But that sounds awkward. Like I don't know, like cultural recommendations from Chris Powell and AJ Barca. It sounds weird and kind of a little hoity-toity for us.
Stuffy.
So we're kind of rebranding it for our show called Points of Interest.
Absolutely. And so this point of interest is a little bit of a technological and analog aspect. You ever see when you arrive at your home or apartment place or whatever that there's a phone book just lying there in a plastic bag on your driveway?
I see the plethora of dead trees that had to be done to have that sit on my stoop that I have to recycle.
I hear a lot of people, especially in the neighborhood, where my family lives, is like, why do they do this? Is there a huge collection of all these phone books?
How do I opt out?
Yeah. There's a website called the National Yellow Pages Opt-Out website. Got a link in the show notes.
Drink.
So there's a website out there called the National Yellow Pages Opt-Out website. You could create a free account and register with your residents. And it allows you the ability in Whatcom County to opt out of three phone books. The decks, the yellow pages, and the action pages all can be not delivered to your place of residence. What a wonderful way to walk the walk about being sustainable, being for the earth, saving trees, et cetera, et cetera.
Reducing your impact.
Yes, we're high-impact podcasters in many ways, but I think having a whole lot of paper is not something that we want to have.
No. As much as we're analog folk. But I do have an analog point of interest for this episode.
Bring it.
So with the holiday season coming up, in the time that we're blessed to take off, I've been doing a little bit more reading and also just brushing up on some stuff just personally. And so I have an analog recommendation that takes a digital twist. So Henry David Thoreau, vintage author, very vintage. How vintage? Let's say 1854 vintage, which if you listen to some of my other points of interest in other episodes, I talked about On Puget Sound, another vintage book. This one, Henry David Thoreau, gets quoted a lot. I have found especially in like minimalist style podcasts and other things, a lot of people point reference to Walden, which is when Henry David Thoreau on Walden's Pond wrote this story. So in 1854 is when this book came out, which means because it was published previous to January 1st, 1924, it is in the public domain, which means you can get a ebook copy for free. I have it on my Kindle, and I've been reading it because I've found, as I've listened to other podcasts, they cite Walden, but they don't match up. So I want to read it so that I can actually get the references and kind of call shenanigans on certain shows.
Go. Yep.
So should you feel that you hear Walden brought up, you go ahead and go up on, I think Project Gutenberg, I think has a copy. I think even the Kindle store. I'll invoke Amazon with regards to if you have a Kindle, they have free books through the ebook store, or you can get it from your own public library, like the Bellingham Public Library System. it's a good read, especially if you're. So far I've only a few chapters in, but listening to this gentleman talk about the solitude of this era, 1854, and this dude is basically doing the minimalist movement and the tiny home movement all in one.
We all do something during this time of year once a year, and that's watch a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And why not, after watching that wonderful half-hour episode from yesteryear, after Linus makes his "lights please" monologue, why don't you, after seeing the credits, crack open Walden on your digital reader or actually get it from the library or buy a copy yourself and start reading a couple pages of it. It might be a nice annual holiday routine to be able to check that out. There's a challenge for you.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a wonderful 2019, AJ, for the last time of this year because we're taking a break for the next end of December or so. Let's take a fork in the show.
Yep, that wraps it up for this last edition of 2019 of the Bellingham Podcast. Thank you, and I cannot say that enough. Thank you, listeners, again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you like to get our podcast. Remember, if you are in the Bellingham area, you can tune into us on Saturdays on Bellingham's very own KMRE 102.3 FM.
And they're community-powered at KMRE.org.
And seriously, thank you again so much from the city by the Salish Sea. I am very thankful, and I am AJ Barce.
And in December, if you're listening to this now, Merry Christmas. And if you're not listening to us now in December, thank you so much again for joining us on the Bellingham Podcast. You know, you made a word, zeitgeist.
What word?
Zeitgeist.
Oh, zeitgeist.
That might be another word of note in 2020.
Zeitgeist.